Hi, and thanks for watching this video about how to conduct a meeting with Congressional staff. I'm Jill Ty, the PAC and Grassroots Associate here at AOTA, and this is the AOTA Federal Affairs team. Why don't we introduce ourselves?
I am Abe Saffer.
Hi, Heather Parsons.
And I'm Andy Bope.
And we're going to walk you through how a typical meeting might go and how you can approach it to be prepared to advocate for OT. The first thing you want to do is always introduce yourself and where you represent, i.e. your school or place of business. In smaller meetings, say 5 to 8 people, everyone should introduce themselves. In addition, in those smaller meetings, make sure every person mentions where they are from and where they practice or may want to practice. You never know what connections you might have with the staff, as many are from the districts and states they work for. And don't be afraid to ask. In larger meetings, it is better to choose 1 or 2 people to lead the discussion and say something along the lines of, "We are students from so-and-so university, and we are all constituents of Representative or Senator so-and-so." You don't want to waste all of your advocating time by introducing everybody. So now we're going to move on to the role play portion of this video. In this role play, I will be playing the staffer, and Abe, Heather, and Andy will be playing the OT advocates.
Hi, Jill. Thank you so much for taking the meeting today.
Of course.
My name's Heather Parsons. I'm an OT student here at AOTA University, which is in the Congressman's district.
Fantastic.
We really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, of course, happy to.
Nice to meet you as well. My name's Andy Bope. I'm also a fellow student at the university, and we're thrilled to be here. We love your boss.
Oh, thanks. Me too.
My name is Abe Saffer, and I'm a professor at AOTA University, and these are my students, so thanks so much for taking the time.
Great, of course, of course. So what can I do for you? Keep in mind that not everyone might be familiar with our profession and what exactly OT is and what it does. Ask the staff if they're familiar with OT, and then, even if they say they are, explain in your words what OT does and how it helps people across the lifespan live their life to the fullest. It's always good to tell your story, or give a quick elevator speech, and make it personal. It is the personal stories that stick with the staffers and the members of Congress. If you feel like you need help, don't be afraid to ask others in the group or your teachers to give an example of this ahead of time.
So, Jill, I know a lot of people don't necessarily know what occupational therapy does. How familiar are you with OT?
Not much. I have a couple friends who are going to school for OT, but that's all I know.
Yeah. So occupational therapy really helps people do the things they need and want to do during the day. This is usually if someone was born with a disability, suffers an accident, or maybe has had a long time disability and they need help getting through the day. So if you think about what you had to do when you woke up this morning to get ready for work and to get here, all of those things can be disrupted by illness or injury.
Okay.
And those are the things that you don't necessarily think you need help with until you do, and that's where occupational therapy comes in.
Gotcha.
And so, occupational therapy practitioners get into this role for a lot of different reasons. For me, when I was in elementary school, I was diagnosed with a learning disability, actually, and I went from not thinking I was going to be able to even graduate high school to being able to get my OT degree, my OTD, and that's because I was able to actually get help from an occupational therapy practitioner in school, and it changed my life completely, and so that's why I decided I absolutely had to pay it forward and train as many as possible.
Okay, cool. Now that you've set the stage and introduced yourselves and OT, you can move into talking about legislative issues. We've given you briefing materials on each of the issues to help you familiarize yourself with them.
So when you go into the office, you're going to have two sets of materials. You're going to have these talking points, which are for you. You can see Abe and Andy have talking points on their issues. This can help you guide your discussion, especially if you get nervous. It gives you a way to look down and sort of reorient yourself to the discussion. And at the bottom, it has the key ask, if nothing else. Like those are the key pieces to make sure you do the ask. There's also going to be this folder, which you'll see. I will give Jill some of the handouts. This has all the leave behind materials for the staff. There will be 1 per group, but this is really important that you leave it behind. So be sure that you review these materials. They're all on the website so that you're comfortable with them and you're comfortable with the talking points before you get to the meeting. So I'm going to start with the therapy cap, and then we'll talk about home health and the funding for health workforce training.
All right.
So the first issue we wanted to talk to you about today is co-sponsoring the Medicare Access to Rehabilitation Services Act.
Okay.
This is also known as the therapy cap. Therapy cap has been a policy that's been in effect for 20 years. And really, if allowed to take effect, what the cap would do is put a hard cap on Medicare outpatient occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech-language pathology services, basically denying beneficiaries the access to healthcare services regardless of whether they're necessary or not. So Congress has never let this go into effect. Well, except for maybe a week here or a week there. Throughout those 20 years, Congress has basically not let this policy take effect because they never meant for it to be a policy that was enacted, but sort of a placeholder until a replacement policy could be put into effect. But here we are 20 years later, and the current process that keeps the cap from taking effect is going to expire at the end of this year.
Oh, okay.
So we need to fix the policy once and for all, because 20 years instead of short-term patches and fixes like we've done 20 years is enough. Representatives Paulson, Kind, Blackburn, and Matsui have a bill that would basically permanently repeal the cap. And we're trying to get as many co-sponsors of that bill to show leadership that there's big support for a permanent cap policy. The Energy and Commerce Committee has had a hearing on this already, and we think that it stands a really good chance of moving, so we'd really appreciate if your boss could support this bill. It's HR 807.
Gotcha. All right.
So did you have any questions about that issue?
I think the only question I have is if Paulson's on it, I think that's a positive because we're kind of buddies with that office, and that's good. Is there a CBO score? Is there any more info?
Yeah, so there is an expense to a permanent repeal of the cap, but there are a couple pieces there. So we are looking at a whole new policy. The committee staff is currently looking at a whole new policy to replace the cap.
Okay.
And so sponsorship of this bill is really just showing your support for that kind of policy.
Okay.
We are working on trying to get that score down and to be less expensive. The other piece is that if patients aren't getting medically necessary services, then eventually that's going to cost the healthcare system more because they're going to have greater disability, they're going to be more dependent. Instead of being able to go home, they may have to stay at a skilled nursing facility. So those services are really helping people live independently. So to deny those services is going to cost the healthcare system more.
Gotcha. Okay.
So if the person in this case, her boss is not currently a co-sponsor of the bill, but if the office that you're going into is a co-sponsor of the bill, you want to say thank you. So before you go into the spiel, you want to say, we know that your boss is a supporter of this bill. We really want to thank them for being a co-sponsor. And then the ask is for them to talk to leadership about how this is a priority for them. It's still okay to go through the policy some, particularly if the staffer looks a little confused. If they seem intimately familiar, you can say thank you, please talk to leadership, and then move on to the next issue.
Yeah. All right, so now it's Andy's turn, and because Andy's bill right now is only in the Senate, I'm going to quickly turn into a Senate staffer.
Thank you for meeting with us.
Of course, I'm happy to be here.
Very good. We're here to discuss a bill that I think is very important that your boss should probably become a supporter of.
Okay.
It's the Medicare Home Health Flexibility Act,
Okay.
which is championed by Senators Heller from Nevada and Cardin from Maryland.
Great.
It addresses really a bipartisan issue, an issue that There's supporters on all sides and throughout the professions. Currently now under Medicare, you may or may not be aware, but when you're doing a first initial exam and then the first comprehensive evaluation for someone seeking home health therapy, that can only be done by a PT or by a speech language pathologist.
Okay.
This, of course, is if there's not a nurse involved, in which case the nurse has to do it themselves. What this bill would do is simply say for CMS to allow the OT to do that first evaluation. So this would make things simpler for the home health agency. It would be very helpful for people in your state, which we know is kind of a rural state, where there are not as many home health agencies, nearby most towns. So we're basically seeking support, co-sponsorship from your boss for this very worthwhile cause. One of the great benefits is, and I know this is key these days, it's scored at 0, so that we know what's
Gotcha.
happening in the budget.
All right, so there's a 0 score on that one. That's good. That's really, really good. I can bring this up to the senator real quick.
Okay.
All right.
Do you have any other questions?
Not so much on this one, because it sounds pretty straightforward.
Outstanding.
But thank you.
Thank you for your support, and we'll let everyone know back in the state that your boss is a big supporter.
Great.
Thanks. We would also like to point out that while the Senate bill has been introduced, the House bill is currently, at the time of this filming, not yet introduced. It will be introduced, however, by by Congressman Costello, Meehan, and Doggett, with a 4th congressman who will probably have co-sponsored the bill by the time you see this.
So we'll keep you updated. Yeah, we'll keep you updated on that, and all the final materials will reflect the sponsors in the House. And one thing I wanted to add is that people wonder why there's no score. OTs can already provide services in home health. They just can't start the case. So there's no additional services. Therefore, there's no score. It's just who can open the case. It's not a case of more services. So that confuses a lot of offices. So that can be your response. There are no new services, just who opens it.
You can also point out that the other groups, ASHA, APTA, and the home nursing group also support this. So there's really no one who objects to it. That's really important when you have congressional meetings.
All right, and now I am back to being a House staffer. Do you guys have any more issues?
Yeah, actually. We're hoping that your boss would become a supporter of the health workforce training programs.
Okay.
Under Title 7 and 8 of HRSA, the Health Resources and Services Administration, they provide a lot of funding, as I'm sure you know, to filling these massive shortages in the health workforce system in rural areas, underserved areas. That's really a barrier for low-income families, seniors, and veterans. So right now, Title 7 and 8 of HRSA was funded last year at $580 million, and we're hoping to continue that next year.
Okay.
And then in addition to that, in the 21st Century Cures Act, occupational therapy was added as one of the practices that can be eligible for the Behavioral Health Workforce Education and Training Grant Program, or BWIT. And so what we're hoping to be able to do is maintain the funding there again, which is $50 million. The House version cut it to 25. The Senate version kept it at $50 million. So our goal is to try to keep it in the Senate numbers across the board for both of these programs.
Okay. So how was this? At what level was it funded last year? Do you know?
It was funded at $50 million last year, and that's what we're looking for again this year.
Great. So still $50 million.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. And how long has the funding been in place? Do you know?
You know, I don't, but we can find out and get back to you on that.
Great. Awesome.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, thank you. The staff might have questions for you about the legislation and the profession in general. This is good, and it shows that they're interested. Answer them to the best of your ability, and don't be afraid to say, I don't know, I'll get back to you. Because that's the best way to make sure that they understand and to make that connection. Offer your contact info or AOTA's Federal Affairs Team's info, because it is incredibly important to offer yourself as a resource and cultivate a relationship with your legislator and their staff. We can help you find out the answers afterwards, and it provides a great opportunity to follow up on your meeting. Additionally, don't feel discouraged if you do not get a lot of questions. It just depends on each staffer's style and how busy they might be at the moment.
You will notice during our sessions that often we did use these sheets. So again, don't hesitate to refer back down. People who come in are often not experts on the legislation. You're not expected to be an expert on this. What that staff wants is you as an expert on the profession of occupational therapy. So the I don't know is perfectly okay, but really what you can do is offer those stories and those examples of occupational therapy and why it's important and why these policies are important.
Always make sure to close by thanking the staff for their time and to ask if they have any additional questions. Make sure to take their card so you have their contact info, and do not forget to follow up with the staff in a few days after your meeting by sending them a thank you note or an email. Staff cover a lot of issues, and a follow-up email can help remind them to pay attention to our issues.
Jill, thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate it. We do have a folder here.
Oh, great.
It has more information on occupational therapy,
Okay.
as well as one-pagers on all the issues with the bill numbers and the co-sponsors.
Great.
If you have any questions, there's also some contact information for
Okay.
AOTA. But I also wondered, what's the best way for me and for us to follow up with you?
Email is probably best. I'm always running around, but it's always on my phone. So.
Okay, and so how can we get your email?
There's my card at the front desk,
Okay.
so I'll get one for you
Okay,
when I walk you out.
great, thank you so
Great.
much.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, pleasure meeting you.
Pleasure meeting you. And I have to ask about your button. You're celebrating 100?
Yes, so the field of occupational therapy is actually 100 years old. We started
Oh.
in 1917 during World War I.
Congratulations. All right, well, happy centennial, and thanks for meeting with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We hope this video is helpful. Keep in mind, you are the expert.